Happy Thursday and welcome to TRB Live, baby! That's right. We're here to talk to you about Star Wars and be nerds for about an hour live with you here on our YouTube channel, which, by the way, we are 3 subscribers away from 2,000. So hopefully we hit that on this episode. That'd be pretty cool. If anyone sees that happens, let us know in the chat. But welcome to TRB Live. We have a really good show today, maybe even a great show. We'll see how we do. But it's me, John, and I'm here with James and Lacey as always. Lots to talk about, guys. There's a ton of news coming out of that Empire piece. James is going to get us going on that in a bit, but we have a few other things to get to first. So I'm just going to fire them off. First of all, if you're watching us live, thank you. That's really cool. Thanks for taking a part of your Thursday nights to be with us. Make sure you do like the video and you are subscribed to the channel. And if you're on social media, tweet out, retweet, all that stuff. Bring people into the base. Let's make it a party. Make Solo 2 Happen Day. A week, let's see, less than 2 weeks now. It's on Tuesday, May 23rd. So if you love Solo and you want to celebrate it, just use the hashtag all day, make Solo 2 happen, and we're going to have a good time celebrating that movie, hoping for more adventures, whether that's going to be through the Lando series or a Solo series, or who knows if they decide to maybe make a movie. We don't know, but it's all about continuing those adventures with Han and Chewie, and we're going to have a great time on Tuesday, May 23rd for Make Solo 2 Happen Day. We'll see you on the internet. And hopefully we have some fun. Next up, guys, what do you think about Freddie Prinze Jr.'s comments? Not only saying is he done with Kanan Jarrus, but that he had been done and just came back for those voice cameos and the appearance in Bad Batch and Episode 9 as a favor, almost. So So James, I'll start with you. Your favorite Star Wars character, at least that I most recently recollect you saying. What did you think about Freddie's comments?
They made sense to me. He kind of said that he was done with the character, and I think that was because he really wanted to put a close on that story and say, like, hey, if I did my thing in Star Wars, and if you want to go back and revisit that character, this is where it is. It's in Rebels, you know? And I was kind of surprised a little bit when he said he didn't want to do the thing at the end of the Star Wars movie. I thought, oh, well, that's a good little addition there. But I'm not surprised by him not wanting to, or he said he didn't want to return to the Bad Batch either. Because I think there was a lot of like, he sounded too old for the character. I think you could have easily just had somebody else do that voice, a younger person. I think it's fine with him saying he's just kind of like, says, guys, just let me, let the character be that. And just I don't want to come back and keep having to revisit this. Cause every time you do more with this character, it sort of takes away a little bit from what it was, or it kind of changes that. So I think he made sense, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and he said that he was on Christian Harloff's show, so I got to give a shout out to him for getting that info out of Freddie, which is cool. Lacey, first of all, you had just notified us privately, as well as some of the comments on here. We hit 2,000 subscribers. All right,
we did.
There it is.
Yay, everyone! Well
98,000 from me wearing a bikini, apparently, at Star Wars Celebration. So
John was trying to push like, 500. I was like, you said 100. Don't.
Yeah.
Don't turn this around.
I mean, that'd be pretty cool if we got 100,000 subscribers, though. So I'll proudly wear it. I apologize in advance if that happens for the site that will be seen. But Lacey, what do you think about? First of all, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you helping us get that number.
Yes.
But Lacey, what do you think? I know you like Freddie Prinze Jr., right? But what do you think about him saying, like, I've been
Freddie
done,
and
man?
I go back. We used to be coworkers.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. No, he's nice. He seems genuine. I think he's someone that has been very open about his Star Wars journey and his Star Wars knowledge and his opinions. I mean, that clip goes viral like every couple months of him being like, you don't like Rey because she's a woman, and like all this other stuff, off on that podcast. Right. I don't blame him for not wanting to come back. He sees it as like, I did this thing, I treasure it, I value it, I loved being a part of it, but I don't want to cheapen it. Yeah. So I completely understand it, and I understand that he came back as a favor. I'm sure Dave called him and was like, "Hey man, can you please do this for me?" Because it seems like from our conversation with Taylor Gray, like Taylor had conversations with Dave Filoni about that ending scene and why Ezra wasn't there. So I'm assuming Dave is the one that probably asked Ashley. He asked Freddie Prinze to come back. So it seems like everybody says yes to Dave, and I don't blame them because he seems awesome too. So
Yeah, yeah. Do you? It just makes me think because like Freddie Prinze Jr. is like a big gamer and he loves wrestling and stuff. Like it wouldn't shock
he's
me if
married
he's
to
like,
Buffy, so he can do whatever he wants.
but it wouldn't shock me if he was like playing Halo while he recorded that line for Rise of Skywalker. He's just like, what do I have to say? He's like, all right, yeah, Ray, rise through the Force. You know, okay, now get out of here, Matthew Wood, get out.
yeah.
No, so that's it for Kanan, unless, which I doubt, because he seems sincere. It's one of those Liam Neeson scenarios, but I don't think it is. I think he's serious. Do you guys think he's serious? You don't think there's any chance it's a red herring?
What if he was the best at selling it?
Well, he loves selling. He's a wrestling fan. He loves
I
selling.
I think it depends.
I don't think so.
Honestly, if Dave asks him. If it was a Dave call, I think he'd take it.
Yeah.
If it's a Kathy call or someone else call, I don't think he'd take it. But even then, I think he's going to stand by what he said.
Yeah, I think he's sincere too.
I don't think he would phrase it that way if he was really wanting to, like, if he was really in the show and he was selling something. I think he would just be like, I don't know, you know, it'd be cool, but they haven't talked to me, you know, or so he would do that. I don't know. But
well,
I definitely don't think he's coming back.
So high-fiving his way out of the Star Wars galaxy is someone coming in, and that's Jaleel White, who of all places was at an Edmonton Oilers game talking to the announcer between periods or before the game. I'm not really sure. He revealed that he's playing an alien pirate in Skeleton Crew, and he said the series comes out in November or December this year.
He's getting a phone call, man. He got a phone call. He got an email.
You know what that made me think of, though? Because the guy was like, so what are you up to now? And that was probably like the biggest thing he's been doing, because I haven't, you know, I like him a lot. Seems like a nice guy, and I grew up watching Family Matters.
I love Family Matters.
I had the doll with the pull string that would do all the little catchphrases. I would pretend I was
hot
Urkel.
Thing on Friday night. Family Matters.
Urkel was
Step
the
by
best.
Step, Full House.
Yeah,
Boy Meets World.
Stefan.
Oh my God, Stefan.
Yeah, I mean, that show went like to Fantasyland,
but it was awesome.
Yeah, but I like that he's probably like, he didn't have a lot going on, but this big giant thing, he's like, you know what? I have to answer this, because what else am I going to say? A commercial for Aflac? Like, I'm not saying he does a commercial for Aflac, but I'm saying like he did this big show. He's playing a villainous type of character. He went for it, and I love it. That's cool. So what do you guys think?
Again, I worry for him because I'm afraid of the phone call that he got. That was like, what are you doing? But at the same time, I'm sure it's not that big of a role that they're going to be like, you're giving it away. And it's just seen as him being excited. Because I see a lot of the side characters and the people that play the droids and stuff in Mando are constantly every week during Mando saying, oh, I did this and I did that and I did this. And it's just like a pride thing, which I totally understand. I'm just pumped to see these actors getting roles. And if he wants to tell me at a hockey game, sure. I'm so pumped for you.
Yeah. And thanks to the Twitter user who tagged us in that tweet to notify us this morning, FIFA Las Vegas 17. So thank you so much.
What a great name.
FIFA Las Vegas, soccer fan and gambling fan, maybe? I don't know. But James, what do you think about Jaleel White spilling the beans? And Skeleton Crew, was that the first time we heard that it's coming out this year?
Yes, in November. We knew it was coming this year because it was included in the press release from Disney at the beginning of the year with all the logos.
Oh, yeah.
And they did mention in Celebration that it was coming, but I don't think they gave us a time frame. I always assumed it was November, so I love that I'm right.
I always thought December.
God, stop. James, what do you think?
I don't think he's playing like a big villain or any sort of thing. I almost wonder if this is a borderline cameo. I think he might kind of be like in the background. It might just be some a thing that he got, because I don't think he's done anything really like spotlight or lead role or anything in a long time. And as far as on, you know, kind of spilling the beans on this particular piece of information, I think that's just his world, like his world coming from when he was younger. This stuff didn't matter, you know? So he's like, oh, I think I'm going to, you know, get into this or do this thing. And it's just not, he's not been in anything that's as kept of a secret as Star Wars. So that I know
This
of.
doesn't matter. Yeah, this doesn't matter. Family matters, but this doesn't. But yeah, I
You're
think he's
telling
going to
me
be
to shut up about talking about how I love that's in November, and you're saying things like that.
$50 that people laughed at that joke. $50.
$50 is a lot.
I got cash on me if you need it. But James, I think he could be playing just one of those like pirates that's working for Kale Organa, Gorian Shard.
Oh my god! And you followed up with Kale. Oh my god!
Kale Organa is a great name.
It was good the first time, not the 17th time.
Well, and now I'm going to do it more. So there we go. All right. So before we get into the resistance report, I do believe we have a super chat.
We do have a super chat. Our super chat comes from first one of the night, Andrew Staley. What up, Andrew?
Andrew.
Miss you, bud.
Andrew,
He said,
thank
"Here's
you.
a few bucks towards the bikini costume."
Oh,
Can't wait
no.
for Japan in 25.
Uh,
I love that
Lord.
nobody wants to pay for my costume, but John's costume.
Can you imagine
Just
me
joking,
walking
Andrew.
around the show floor, 6'1", 220 pounds in a Leia bikini in Japan?
It's gonna happen. So
Just
can't wait to.
the whitest dude imaginable, just walking around.
You act like
Oh.
guys don't wear that costume all the time.
I know, but you know me. It's definitely not in my comfort zone.
It's gonna
I
be
know
hilarious.
we know people who have done it who like embrace doing it.
Mhm.
Not me. I'm gonna have a really tough day if that happens. But that'd be cool if we got that subscriber count. So we'll see.
You're
you know?
just the best. So thank you so much. We're excited to see you in the chat, bud.
Thank you, Andrew. You're the man. And cheers, pal. All right, James. It is time for the resistance report.
It's the resistance.
Woo-wee. All right, we got a lot to talk about in the Star Wars world because the Empire magazine came out and it wasn't even Star Wars on the cover. It wasn't even like this big Star Wars thing. It was just like, here's a catch up with Kathleen Kennedy and probably still from Celebration that they're just like kind of like rolling out over time. But it was a lot discussing the movies, specifically Dave Filoni's movies, a lot about Ahsoka, a lot about Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, Andor Season 2, lots of quotes from actors, some new information about some of these shows. There's so much to convey. I don't even really know where to begin on all of this. I guess we can just start kind of at the top with the movie information as far as Kathleen Kennedy sort of giving a recap. Now, I'm not going on the article order. This may be how it played out in the article too, but you know, there's a subreddit that breaks down a lot of the Star Wars content, and they kind of just said like, hey, I'm going to summarize this stuff. You know, it's all in the article, but these are the quotes, and this is what they were talking about. So Rey's movie, Rian Johnson, Taika Waititi, Lando and Rogue Squadron, and anything else, you know, and then getting into the movies that are more confirmed with like Dave Filoni and all that stuff. John, you want to kick us off? What are your thoughts on Kathleen Kennedy's comments on all of the movies that are, you know, still in that like middle ground?
I think she has to stop. Well, first of all, I think it's not her fault. I think people need to stop asking her about Rian Johnson. It's just getting to the point where it's the same answer over and over again. It really does feel like Groundhog Day, where she's like, oh my God, yes, we're talking. He's busy. He's so talented. One day, it's just like, if his trilogy's obviously not happening, he's talked about, I'd like to do something. So the trilogy's gone. So now it's just like, if that's gone, then stop answering the question about a hypothetical. Like, clearly we know Kathleen Kennedy loves Rian Johnson. He's a talented filmmaker. He's in his own lane right now, being very successful, doing his own thing. If there's nothing new that you're going to get from her, just stop asking the question. I know he's like one of those hot button people that gets clicks and stuff. And if that's why you're asking it, that shouldn't be the only reason to do it. I know, you know, people got to make their money somehow, but
people are waiting for them to be like the one time she gives the different answer.
Right.
And I'm sure when that answer comes, it's not going to come via someone asking her. They're going to put an announcement out, I'm sure. So that one, I was like, oh, like, geez. The Taika thing is bothersome to me because how do you have a first and second act of a movie which is reportedly supposed to be a standalone movie and say you're trying to figure out your third act? Like, write your story. I don't know, that whole thing bothered me a little bit. The Rey thing, I liked what she said a lot because she's saying the Jedi are in chaos. There's even a question of how many exist anymore, and I love that. It sounds mysterious. It sounds uncertain. It sounds like there may not be a lot of Jedi out there, and that's right in my breadbasket. Like I keep saying, like, I don't want to see the Attack of the Clones arena scene. I don't want to see this whole giant facility full of Jedi out of nowhere. I think it should be small. I like the idea of Jedi being specialized, these sort of wizards, and there's mystery to it. I'd like going back to that. And that's what I liked a lot about the sequel trilogy. There wasn't a lot. It's very minimalized, and when they used lightsabers, it counted. And when they used the Force, it counted. So I actually really liked what you had to say about the Rey movie. And then I'll just touch on a couple other things, and then I'll get to let you guys hop in, and then we can, I guess, circle around because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Her saying Lando and Rogue Squadron are still on the books. I don't know about Rogue Squadron. I hope the Lando thing's still in the books because Donald Glover was saying he's still interested, but he wants to make sure it's good. It sounds like that was sort of his call because early on, if you remember when she was talking about that, the Lando series, she said she was waiting for Donald Glover to be ready. Remember those were her earlier answers about this whole thing before Celebration last year. So I think this is all on him saying, like, I don't like the story that you guys came up with for this. If I'm going to come back, that whole thing he said about using your time, and time is valuable now in this post-pandemic world and stuff. I think he's telling them to let's boost that quality a bit on this story. So I think that being sort of still being tinkered with is him saying, like, come on. The Rogue Squadron, I have no idea what they're going to do with that because Patty Jenkins is gone. So that sounds like a whole reboot. And like Lacey says, like, give it to Paul Sun-Young Lee. Like, give him that if you need to. And then the Adventize thing about, we'll put out movies when they're ready. I just make the movies, make them good. And I don't need an explanation. That sounds like a safety net comment. Like, in case we don't hit that date, just so you know, it's because we're making sure they're really good for you. So there's a lot of good here, and some like and some things I just wish they stopped asking her. I won't touch on the Filoni stuff yet. I wanted to get you guys in the conversation and the Ahsoka stuff. So that's what I got on mainly the movie stuff anyway.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add either. Like, as far as the Rey's movie, that sounds cool. The Rian Johnson thing, 100% agree. Taika Waititi thing, yeah, a little strange that she's getting into weird specifics like that. Like, we're halfway through it, we can't quite figure out the end. That's a little strange.
He's slow. Yeah.
The Lando and Rogue Squadron thing, I'm like, Lando seems like it's kind of moving along, but in like slow development. But I'm like, it's weird that you put Rogue Squadron in that same thing. I guess technically they're both still on the books. You still want to make them, but it's because I don't see those two as two different things. One looked like it was like happening and fell apart, and the other one looks like it's slowly happening. And
one's a show and one's a theatrical film, unless that's being reworked to a series. Yeah.
I did think it was strange though that on the comments, as far as like everything else, she said it's much better to tell the truth, and I'm like, it's not that she's ever been lying, but it made me feel
she did
a little
lie.
bit like
She lied about the Kevin Feige stuff. That is definitely a lie.
That's true.
That is definitely a lie.
I was thinking more along the lines of like her being open about things. Like, it's much better to just be open about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And transparent about how this whole process works and stuff. And I guess she's being a little open about the Taika thing, but it's like, I feel like you've built your entire culture around being secretive. So it seems a little strange to be like, well, we just tell the truth and we just tell everybody what's happening. I'm like, I don't know that you do. But Lacey, what are your thoughts on all this stuff?
Well, the Taika stuff is concerning, seeing as they announced his movie on May 4th in 2020, and it is now past May 4th in 2023, and they don't have a full story for his movie yet. And he's the one that's been nominated for like an Oscar for his original screenplay. So it's a little concerning that she's saying, oh, you know, he wouldn't be mad at me for saying this, but he's really slow and, you know, he's taking his time. And you're like, it feels like they keep using that term of like, oh, we're taking our time. We're taking a breath. And my response is, why? Why do you need more time? And I think that I'm going to get hit with a lot of people being like, well, as long as they make a good story, I don't care how much time they have. You can sit on a story for 10 years, 20 years. It doesn't mean it's going to be any better than in one that you wrote in a year. So right. I just kind of push back a little bit. And I'm like, I don't know. Like you were saying, James, with the transparency thing, I don't think they've been transparent. I don't think she's told the truth all the time just because that's the way the business works. And I don't think you can. I don't think she's at a fault for it, except the Kevin Feige stuff, which was so blatantly not true. Yeah. But like the Lando stuff, they announced that in November of 2020. We've heard nothing about that. And then you have Donald Glover talking about it being like, oh, well, the story's got to be good. That means the story's not good. And it's hard to be confident about these movies and about this franchise when you're hearing that the stories aren't good. Because if anything, the stories have to be the best part. The stories have to be what is the driving force behind making these movies and shows and books and comics and everything else. If the story's not there, you have nothing. And those are the things that have transcended for 40 plus years, you know? So it's crazy to me that they're having trouble with the stories.
And didn't he just get like accept directing Tower of Terror movie now too, Taika?
Taika,
like, I don't know.
Taika says yes to too many things. I think that he's not slow. I think he just moves around a lot. He's constantly working on so many.
I'm going slow projects. By what she said. I don't think he's slow either because he's churning out stuff like that pirate show that he does. I'm blanking on the name.
Sails.
Black Sails.
Yeah. Black Sails.
No, not Black Sails. It's not Black Sails. Black Sails is a different pirate show. This is something different. Anyway, that show, he's written 2 seasons of it. Like they're done. So it's like he's doing that. He's doing all the Thor stuff. It's just
flags or something.
I don't know. But anyway, I think that our flag means death. Kyle says
our flag means death. Kyle. Yeah, that's it.
So much pirate stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it's tricky to look at these stories and be like, oh, cool. Like, this is a great update. Because from her, I didn't really get a good update. I see that, you know, they give a little bit of a tidbit for the Rey movie. You're like, okay, Jedi and Chaos, that makes sense. Please let this be actually 15 years later. You know, they say it's 15 years later, but like, let it actually something happen in that time frame, because the sequel trilogy was so back to back to back that you didn't get any development from certain aspects of the story. So it's interesting to see where that's going to go. But the Rian Johnson stuff, I'm just like, they announced his stuff in 2017 for a trilogy. Nothing has come about it. It's now gotten to the point that they're like, well, we'll do it someday. Then you need to be honest with the update and say that, hey, he's not doing a trilogy anymore because he's not doing anything. And I just think that it's just kind of all these announcements, you get so excited. And then there's just this letdown of, oh, nothing's coming of it. It is interesting that she brought up Rogue Squadron because everything that we've heard has said that that's basically dead. But I'm hoping, like John had brought up, they're reworking it for Paul and Carson Teva and characters that we've met in The Mandalorian. I think that would be a great thing for that show / movie. We're going to get into later in the show about how Disney Plus is doing. So I think that might affect some of these decisions. If not, they're already impacting these decisions of how they're moving between movies and shows. The one comment that did irk me, and these guys know this because I said something about it during the week, was in this interview, which it isn't in here, but it's in the interview. Kathleen Kennedy talks about how she compares Star Wars kind of to like James Bond. And she's like, you know, James Bond is this big event. And to me, first of all, I don't think Star Wars should be comparing itself to anything, first of all. Second of all, as someone that my husband loves James Bond and is thoroughly in that kind of franchise and fandom and stuff, those fans are very unhappy with how James Bond has been handled. So it's interesting to me that she chose a franchise that people are very unhappy with how they're doing those movies and how the space of time they have between movies. The last movie they sat on for like 2-3 years before they released it, and they haven't even started production on the next one, and it's annoying James Bond fans. So I was one of those people that I was like, that is not the franchise to choose when you're talking about comparing your trying to make it an event, because the people that like that franchise are currently unhappy with how they're not making James Bond an event anymore. But yeah, we can get into Filoni now. I'm done with this part.
Yeah, well, it's just as the article went on, it talks a little bit more about Dave Filoni's stuff, specifically on what his thoughts about Thrawn are and bringing him to the big screen, and what was the whole process like when he was asked by Kathleen Kennedy to make a Star Wars film. But it was interesting. I give it up to the person asking the questions here, the interviewer, because he said something that I knew, but I didn't really ever put it together, which was the first thing we ever saw Dave Filoni do was the theatrical Star Wars movie, which was the Clone Wars. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting that the first thing he ever did was a theatrically released Star Wars movie. And now he's coming full circle and doing it again. And it's totally in a different light. But all this time, even though I knew that information, it seemed like it was something that he was sort of building up to. But yeah, it was like the first thing he tackled. So I'm going to bounce back at you again, Lacey, on the thoughts on Dave Filoni's comments.
Dave Filoni is a true delight. And every interview I read of his comes from a place of, I feel like, passion and care and experience. And also like he's very humble. Like he can't believe that he's having the conversation that he's having every time he's having it. Whatever project it is, he's like, I can't believe I'm here. And you're like, you've been at Lucasfilm for like 20 years. And he's like, I can't believe I'm still here. But I just liked him talking about how he's doing a movie, and how the big thing that stuck out to me was him saying that, the first thing he remembers of directed by in a movie was George Lucas. So the most important thing to him is to stay true to George and his vision and his story. And if he gets to expand on that and those characters and themes and whatnot, that they still ring true to what George created. And it's nice to hear that there's someone still kind of holding the flag for George of, I trust what George made and I want to continue on that legacy. And I might bring things that I think are cool into that world. But at the end of the day, it would be something that George would approve of. And it's nice to know that like he's in meetings being like, no, George wouldn't like this, or yes, George would like this. So that was really cool. I just like him talking about Thrawn too. We have a lot of Thrawn fans in Star Wars. I'm not one of the biggest ones, but I get it. He's really cool. And to hear Dave Filoni talk about how he was always in the back of his mind of like someone that he wanted to bring in and like bring into as being the big bad villain, I think fans are really in for something really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that Dave Filoni has been basing Thrawn more on the Heir to the Empire Thrawn, and that's apparent in like that was Thrawn to him, and then he brought that sort of villain Thrawn to Rebels. It's interesting. I don't know how closely he's working with Timothy Zahn. I don't think they really got into those types of details, but he says, I'm trying to bring that character it's his justice. But there's been these other books that, like paint him in a positive light and stuff. So it's kind of interesting, but Dave Filoni is like, no, he's the big bad. Clearly, he's the guy who's the big threat, and he's going to be in my movie and all this other stuff. So I, as a person who has read all the Thrawn books and has seen this, like where he's sort of the hero of those books, it's interesting to see him as such a villain. I think even coming out of, like some of those books, people will be like, it's so weird to see Thrawn like dropping bombs on the city, like that's just so out of his character considering what we've seen in these other books. But, Tim himself says, I've written Thrawn to be one character all the way through, from, it canon and not, he gets all whatever, but he's like, to me, it's a believable character. You could that all my books are canon in sort of his head. He understands the difference. I'm not trying to say he's confused, but I'm saying he writes the same character. So I don't know. I just always thought that was interesting. But listening to Dave talk about that and talk about him getting this movie and being set up to make Thrawn the big bad of his villain, it's all interesting stuff. And I say go read the article. John, what are your thoughts on Dave Filoni?
Yeah, Filoni gets it, and he also knows how to humbly approach this stuff. Because I feel like there's some people who, make Star Wars that kind of come across as a bit like egotistical. But for being the guy who was sort of, for lack of a better term, an understudy to George Lucas, and he does always make sure he brings it back to George Lucas, because like I was saying at Celebration, like George Lucas was hardly talked about except for Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. Kathleen Kennedy doesn't really talk about him that much, and I think it's kind of it's a little sad in a way that George Lucas, like, not that he's ignored, but like the guy invented all of this, and people need to remember that. And Dave Filoni definitely does. And it's just like I said, like the further and further we go into the future, the less connectivity we're going to have to why George Lucas created this thing, because as things evolve, you distance yourself from the origin of it, and things naturally, whether you want them to or not, change. And as people pass on and generations move on, it gets harder and harder to preserve why this whole thing exists in the first place. But at least right now, we all know that we have Dave Filoni, and he completely understands it because he's within an arm's reach of that original tree that created all of this. So, and I'm not calling George Lucas a tree. I'm just saying, like, you keep, like they say, this the phrase, the fruit falls from the tree. So, but I love him leaning clearly into this, because as we saw at Celebration, as we've seen him in other interviews, and as we've heard from people like when we interviewed Taylor Gray, Dave Filoni, and Steven Stanton recently put out this cool video talking about his final time recording season 5 of Clone Wars. Dave Filoni is very, very protective and secretive. He likes the theatrics of fans finding something out for the first time when it's a completed product, and I appreciate that. Do I want Lucasfilm to be more transparent about projects? Yes. About what's in the projects? No. And he preserves that. So, but for him to be of that personality, to just go right out there and say, like, I see him as a villain, I think is important, and shows that he wants to make it clear that we are establishing this villain, because I do still think Star Wars has a villain problem. And there's always, for some reason, this want and desire to complicate what that means. And I understand the modern way of storytelling, which is, well, you got to see it from the villain's point of view. They think they're right all the time. I understand that, but Star Wars was made very simplistically. And I'm not saying you always have to keep it simple. We have Andor, obviously, and stuff like that. But Star Wars is good versus evil when it comes down to it. George Lucas likes speed. He wanted to go fast in space. He's the Ricky Bobby of fantasy space opera. But at the same time, he also understands the morality of good versus evil. And Filoni understands that simplicity. And every time he explains Star Wars, we're always like, oh my God, Filoni just blew my mind. But when you break it down what he says, it's really simple, classic storytelling. So he knows we need a good villain here. And Thrawn being that makes so much sense. So I like that he leaned into that. So I'm all in on what he said about that. And I think that makes me even more excited about that movie, because I think all of that's going to culminate in that movie. I'm not saying who's going to live or die or what's going to happen, but seeing Thrawn on a big screen after being built up in these shows, and seeing Mando, Ahsoka, the Ghost Crew, and all that being built up on that side, the Mandalorians, I think it's going to be an epic movie. And I love that he's leaning into villains, because I've been saying it for a long time. Star Wars has a villain problem. You got this cool, unique villain who filled this gap when Star Wars was quote unquote over after 1983. They put out these books. Oh, Star Wars, there's new Star Wars. It's these books. It kept Star Wars sort of alive until the prequels came out and the special editions. So Thrawn, like, will always have that special place in people's hearts between 1983 and 1997. And I like that they're saying he's going to be our villain for this chunk of time pre First Order. I think it's cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm gonna bounce it right back at you, and let's move into these comments about the Ahsoka show, getting a lot of different statements from the cast, and talking about that combination between Rebels. Is it the Rebels sequel or does it stand on its own? Couple comments there. What are your thoughts on that, John?
I think this is more of a directive to the cast to make sure that the wide net of Star Wars fans or people who enjoy Star Wars can see this as an accessible show without having to do too much homework. And it's like when Filoni, who, like I said, if you put a blaster to his head behind the scenes at Celebration, he would tell you need to watch all of it, all of Rebels, watch all of it. But when he's on the press line, he's like, you don't really need to, but maybe watch some of season 4. It's like the guy who put his blood, sweat, and tears into 4 seasons of this show is not going to really be honest and say, yeah, you just have to watch a couple of season 4. I think they want to make sure people watch this stuff. And our next story is going to be why that is, because of what's going on with Disney Plus. They want to make, I'm sure this came down from Disney. Like, we appreciate what you guys are doing with these stories and connectivity, but you got to make sure that everyone believes they can show up and watch this show without feeling like they're going to be lost. And I think that's really, really important to sell to all Star Wars fans. Like, my dad will go see a Star Wars movie. He'll watch a Star Wars show. My brother will too. Are they going to watch Rebels? No, probably not. So I think it is important for them to do that. So all these things that, Mary Elizabeth Winstead said, that Rosario Dawson has said, that Filoni has said, it all seems to fit into this same template of let's make sure we can reach everyone, but also let the diehards know, like, wink, wink, we still got you. It's still Dave Filoni's show here. You're going to get everything you need, but it's not going to be stuff that makes people completely confused who may not be all dialed into everything. So that's my just takeaway from it. It's a smart move, and and the diehards know if Filoni's name on it is they're going to be taken care of it. It's going to be done right, but they want everyone to be able to watch this stuff.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite comments out of this was from Rosario Dawson. She said, "There's no boss over them. There's no one telling them that they have to do this." Then she says, "This is a carryover from Rebels." But I liked that it had this interesting perspective of like, there wasn't this military government that was like, this Thrawn guy's coming in, you're my lieutenant, you got to go fight this person. It feels like all of these people collectively are like, we're free. We're, we don't report to anybody. We just see bad happening in the world and we have to do something about it. Which is kind of an interesting aspect going into that show, because I think almost always we've felt like Star Wars has been this sort of like the military thing where like our heroes are sort of in the rank and there's always somebody at the top pulling strings. This is one of those times where we're sort of getting the opportunity to see somebody just say, I'm going to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, kind of a thing. Lacey, any thoughts on the Ahsoka stuff?
I'm going to be honest. You guys gave like really deep answers. I'm most excited for this Lothcat that they were talking about.
I didn't say a thing about it.
Well, like the idea that this thing is like a full puppet that has full mechanical face, and like they say that it's better than Baby Yoda, which I love that they called it Baby Yoda. That made me laugh. But the fact that they're saying this thing is so intense and so awesome gets me excited, because anytime there's some type of creature or puppeteering or any type of animatronics in Star Wars, like that's what I love the most. That's what makes it Star Wars for me, and like super creative and like just reminds me of being a little kid and having an imagination and being like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So I'm most hyped to see the Lothcat and other creatures that we're going to see in this show, honestly.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's go on to the next show, which is Acolyte. This was originally pitched a while back, or it was pitched by Leslie Headland as Kill Bill meets Frozen, and they talk a little bit about what that could mean, and she breaks that down a little bit, and then we got a bunch of comments. Again, this feels to me like it was from Celebration. This is moving along the line. They were just getting some quotes from all the different people, but it is kind of interesting if you go through and read a lot of these comments, because there are some interesting things about these particular characters' designs and what their motivations are, finding out if they are or are not force sensitive. There's some cool stuff here. Lacey, did you have any thoughts on the Acolyte?
So I really wished they released the footage that they showed at Celebration so that everybody could have enjoyed it, because it really was one of the highlights for me. It was just really intense, and like the moment that Carrie Ann Moss came on screen, like everyone in the room was like, "Yo!" Like it was
Mhm.
crazy. This show surprised me. It off the bat probably wasn't something that I was super excited for, but seeing the footage and hearing the people talk about it has gotten me more excited. Um, I really like how Amanda's character has the mask. She is like wears a mask, which looks very Visions to me. And as you guys know, I love Visions. So it does have that kind of samurai feel, which some of the actors go into in here. But I'm gonna be honest, like nothing in this interview necessarily gave me anything that I was like, oh, interesting, because it's all stuff I felt that we kind of got at Celebration. But I understand people that haven't been at Celebration probably wouldn't have heard it. I'm most hyped for Jonas being a Wookiee, getting to be a Wookiee again. Like
Right.
that's so exciting for me that he gets to not only be a Wookiee but a Jedi Wookiee. Um, yeah, I don't really know what to expect from this show. I'm gonna be honest. They all seem like they're really hyped and they're really excited. I got a really, I don't know. I was a little nervous that it's described as Kill Bill meets Frozen, because that's not really my jam in the sense of like Kill Bill, maybe Frozen, but not the Kill Bill side. So I'm a little nervous just because it does, Leslie Headland says a couple times like, oh, it has darker tones. It's more dark. It's more, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, because that's just not what I'm into, but I'm excited to see what comes out of it. And the fact that they have multiple characters that aren't just human is cool to me.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting comments. Daphne Keane saying she's half alien, half human by species. She's a Theline. And they kind of describe her as like David Bowie meets Star Wars because she has a mullet and horns.
Yeah.
Inspired all by the character from the Jabba Palace. That's interesting information. We knew the stuff about Rebecca Henderson playing Verdestra Rowe. That's pretty cool. But they talked to how there's
Yeah.
how the dark side is infiltrating this, and it's just the fact that there's a lot of Jedi. So it's like, oh, well, then there's going to be a lot of extras. Maybe this is that Attack of the Clones moment John's talking about. There's just a lot of Jedi walking around. That's all
Mhm.
interesting. But as many Jedi as that it seems like they might stick into the show. I was kind of interested to see that Manny Jacinto is just playing a normal guy, just a
Normal
regular
dude.
guy is the quote. And I was like, okay, well, it kind of has like a Haja vibe a little bit. Like he's sort of getting wrapped up in the story. He doesn't actually have any special powers, or he's not part of the military or anything like that. It's just part of it. It's just a character that's kind of comes along. But he says he's interested in the Jedi and sort of gets caught up in that whole like High Republic tower spiral, whatever you want to say. Lots of interesting things. Again, when it comes down to character designs and things too, we got a little
Mhm.
bit of description on what some of these characters are going to be wearing and looking like, and their inspiration and stuff. John, what were your takeaways for Acolyte?
Acolyte, you guys said a lot that I agree with, and the footage. I agree, Lacey. I think if everyone saw the footage, we wouldn't even need to talk too much about it, and I don't think Leslie
No.
Headland would need to talk too much about it. Let it speak for itself. It was the one stuff that really I think stood above everything, um, in terms of the new footage we saw. I thought it looked so good. But I'm gonna say this: I think that Manny Jacinto's character is going to be like the sleeper hit for this show, because I think Star Wars needs that regular human type of character that we can all view the galaxy through, like Han Solo in A New Hope. Like you got these creatures, these wizards, all this crazy stuff, and then you have this regular dude who's just like, oh, I can see myself in that guy's shoes. And Manny Jacinto is like, this is like chaotic. We have dark side, we have Jedi, we have Jedi Wookiees, and then you have this guy who's like they're saying is a normal guy. Now, this again could be one of those red herring things, but I think it's important for especially these stories that take place in heavy Force user eras to have regular people. And I think you need humor in Star Wars too. And typically, Force users aren't all that funny. I think humor was lacking quite a bit in the prequels. I think George did his best to try to make the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan have some humor. It didn't really work for me that much. You need these characters who aren't so powerful to just sort of be the every person. And I think this character is going to be like a sleeper hit for the show. And I think people are going to really like draw themselves to that guy's character because he's young, good looking, and he's just playing someone everyone could feel like I'm that person in Star Wars because I don't have the Force. Like he's going to be our eyes in this show. I think he's going to be the sleeper hit for this series.
Yeah. Well, we really honestly didn't get a whole lot of information about Andor, just a little bit, maybe about the motivations behind some of the characters, and potentially just a little bit of information around a scene that Mon Mothma has and her motivation there.
And James,
but
just for the sake of time on the episode, should we just say, like, Tony Gilroy said he's ceasing the production element? There's not too much to that, right? He's just sort of like
correct,
bowing to the strike and respecting the writer's strike. So
yeah. He's not going to continue doing work on Andor if the strike is happening, and he made sure that it was like May 3rd, May 2nd. He was like following all of that protocol, and so it was a big news story that he stopped. But it is just in conjunction with the writer strike, and it is kind of interesting because that show could get stopped for longer. It depends on how long this strike happens.
But
I imagine that things will get resolved and it will still be able to delivered on the time frame that they were looking for. But you never know with this stuff because it's just it's will the people, you know what I mean? Like how long the battle goes and how long before one side eventually caves and says we're okay with that. We'll move forward. I don't know if Lacey, if you have any thoughts on Andor or Tony Gilroy.
I don't. I'm a little confused because I thought we were talking about the Empire stuff. The Tony stuff's later, no?
I just said for the sake of time on our show.
Because they talk about Skeleton Crew too, which we didn't really mention, which they talk about.
I was going to go.
Yeah, Jude Law gets
going a little out of order, guys. We're shifting things up on the fly here.
So Jude Law gets into his character and how his character, like the thing is they're talking about how on set, which reminded me very much of Drew Barrymore, about how kids really believe what they see on set, like especially under a certain age, like they're very much into the aliens and creatures and sets and whatever, and they really believe in these things when they're acting. And it reminded me of Drew Barrymore with E.T., where it was like she really thought E.T. was a real creature, and like the people on set got to a point where they would never leave E.T. not with a puppeteer just in case she was around, because they just wanted to keep kind of the thing going, which is such a fun behind the scenes moment. But yeah, I really love Jude Law talking about it because it seems like he's taking it very serious because he's playing the more kind of darker tone, I guess, in the series. Like he's like a more elevated character than obviously these kids that just believe everything and think everything's wonderful and like they're children. But the idea that they place this very much as an Amblin project, which is it's a kids movie or a kids show, but it's not for kids. It's for everyone. And so there are going to be things here that maybe go over a kid's head, but they're very much for the adults, or the kid inside the adult, so to speak. But I really liked how Jude Law said that, yeah, sometimes I'd get really serious on set and all the kids would be like, is he mad? Is he okay? And it's not. It's like him just playing his role, which I thought was just very funny. But I'm super pumped for that show as well.
Yeah, it seemed that we got some comments from the creator himself saying, about the talking about, the process of going through like what Amblin was and what they were trying to do, what Kathleen Kennedy was trying to bring alive with a lot of those things, and all that is really cool. John, I was gonna flip over to you because I know he had some comments about Han Solo.
Yeah, Jude Law said his favorite character is Han Solo, and he's correct.
Very quickly, he said that.
Yeah. So I love that. I always liked Jude Law, and he seems to be really excited to be a part of Star Wars, which, as you know, I love. But yeah, I mean, there's not too much more here for me to comment on. It feels like a lot of the things we have heard previously. But when you put out things like an Empire magazine, this isn't just for Star Wars fans to read. You want to make sure other people are reading this stuff and saying, because they may not have heard interviews from Star Wars Celebration. So it's important to to us diehard fans, we're like, we already heard this. But it's like for someone, they're like, I didn't even know this was a show. What is this, Empire Magazine? Let me check this out. Jude Law and Star Wars? Cool. So I completely understand that. But it looks great. I love the Amblin stuff. I love the old Spielberg 80s stuff, Goonies, all that. And this does feel like it's going to be right in the pocket with that. So if you take that type of storytelling into Star Wars and the smart approach of not making it a kid's show, it just happens to be these kids are involved in this situation. I like that. So I think Skeleton Crew is going to be a fun series. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it.
Yep, very much so. I think it's going to balance very beautifully between lighthearted and dark fun.
Yeah.
Very similar to the Stranger Things and the other things that we have these days. But I did want to, before we move on to the next big Disney Plus losing subscriber story, see if we had some super chats.
We do. So first up, we have Kenneth. What up, Kenneth? He said, hey guys, love you all. When do you think Dr. Afro will show up in live action? So we appreciate the super chat. I'm going to hold on to that because we're doing Ask the Resistance shortly, but I just want to acknowledge that we got it. And then Matt Lawless, thank you so much. He also has some questions here. Hey, TRB, maybe it's just me, but I noticed Mark Hamill was in great shape during Carrie Fisher's ceremony last week. Do you think we'll see Luke soon? Gonna save that also till we get to Ask the Resistance. So we'll BRB on TRB.
There you go. All right. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Disney Plus thing because it looks like they're in their second quarter of losses. The second time Disney Plus has actually lost subscribers and money, shedding nearly 4 million subscribers. It's kind of an interesting thing. I saw something recently that was talking about how technically Disney Plus Hulu plus ESPN is bigger than Netflix right now. But it's still one of those things where like not any one of those single entities can take that out. So if you're looking at the Disney company and their streaming services, it's, Hulu is up, ESPN Plus is up, but Disney Plus itself, that particular streaming service down. It's all interesting, but John, what are your thoughts on Disney Plus losing all these subscribers?
So I don't think it's as bad as it sounds because the bulk of the losses came out of India, which a lot of those subscribers came from like access to highlight matches or correct me if I'm wrong, something like that. Indian cricket matches. I'm sorry. Indian Premier League cricket matches, which they now dropped off the service. People probably dropped off their subscribers. They probably weren't there for, Wookiees and the bounty hunters and Jedi. So the losses, it says in US and Canada, was only about 300,000 subscribers. So the total loss of 4.6 million, a lot of those came via India with that Hotstar combo. So it's not as doom and gloom as it sounds. It's not good, of course, because it's still a loss. The one thing that you got to pay attention to is what the CFO of Disney, Christine McCarthy, said, which is they're in the process of reviewing content and will be removing certain content from their platforms, but also that they're going to be producing lower volumes of content in alignment with their shift in strategy. So again, but that also sounds bad because that means, they're making less stuff. But you always got to pair that with who else is in power, which is Bob Iger, who has said, we're going to lean more heavily into our mainstay big IPs. So I don't think Star Wars is going to be part of the reduction in what they make. I think it's going to be these offshoot things that aren't big draws. So I think Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, like a lot of their big IP stuff that they put a lot of investment into and a lot of budget money into, and clearly stuff in the theme parks, which the theme parks are starting to do better than they were before, are going to be okay. So when she says, when you hear quotes like we're going to be lowering or reducing the volume of content we create, I personally don't think that that's going to be Star Wars. So I think Star Wars is going to actually be fine. And as Bob Iger said, we're going to lean more into that stuff. So I think we may even see an uptick in what's created for Star Wars. And it might be a good thing for Star Wars, because if you reduce the volume of stuff you're making, you can use the budget that may have gone into other things and beef up the budget of these Marvel and Star Wars shows, which we got to admit, some of them have felt a little underproduced in terms of quality, which comes to dollars. So I actually am taking this story that sounds negative in two folds, with the subscriber losses and with the reduction in stuff they're going to produce. And I think both of those things actually are going to lend themselves to being a good thing for the important stuff that helps Disney stay strong, which is stuff like Star Wars. So I'm feeling okay about all this. I actually think Star Wars may be better off if they trim the fat, so to speak, and lean more heavily into the stuff that works, like Star Wars.
Totally. Lacey?
Well, I think it's interesting that once again, the Disney theme parks are carrying Disney. No one's surprised. That thing is those parks are their bread and butter, and they make a lot of their money, and they've been introducing a ton of new experiences. I know they had announced recently that they're bringing back dining plans and all this stuff. Like, they're leaning back heavy into the parks right now, that have been honestly more packed than ever, from my understanding. They're also going to take Hulu and Disney Plus and combine them later this year into a one app experience. I think people can expect the price of that app experience to go up if they're combining two things together. And I think Disney knows that. And so whatever their price is now, I forget what it is. It's like, what, $7.99, $8.99 a month? That's going to go up probably. So get ready for that. I do think that there's a shift here. You know, it's normal for these services, whether it be Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, whatever, to have churn. I think that's normal. People drop off and come back when certain shows or movies are on. However, I do think by saying that they're going to produce lower volumes of content to align with strategic shift, I think that that does affect everything, in the sense that they might have 10 projects in line for Star Wars and they might only produce 8. I think that Disney is deciding where they should put their money. And I think you're going to see, and we've talked about it before, more movies coming out than TV. I think for the past few years, they've pushed TV really hard, especially with the pandemic. I think they're going to they're shifting more into movie experiences. They know that's where the movie is, or the money is. They know that people want to go back to the movies, and it's just a smart business plan, because it's people watch these shows, whether it be The Mandalorian or Andor or whatever, once, and then that's it. People will go back to see a good movie like Avatar 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So, and they get it on demand. They buy the digital copy. You know, there's so much stuff that goes into a movie experience over a TV experience. So I'm interested to see what comes from that. But I definitely think with Iger back, everything that was a year ago is completely different. Because he's just going to go in and get things back on track, so to speak, of what he thinks the company values and thinks is more important. And I know that TV isn't the top of that. Whereas Chapek really pushed streaming and said that streaming is our new thing and we're all about streaming. And I think Iger's kind of backtracking that and being like, no. Parks, customer experience, merchandising, movies, like that's what Disney does. So interested to see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and we can wrap up Resistance Report this week. Why don't you take us into the questions that we had?
Yeah. Do we want to go into actually ask the Resistance?
We can do it if we want. Let's go.
All right, guys.
I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
Ask the Resistance.
It's time for Ask the Resistance. Let's go.
Okay.
Who's doing it? You doing it?
I'm doing it. So first up, we have Matt Lawless. Thank you so much for the super chat. We really appreciate it. Like I said before, he said, "Hey TRB, maybe it's just me, but I noticed Mark Hamill was in great shape." He was during Carrie Fisher's star ceremony last week. Do you think we'll see Luke soon, or am I full of Filoni? John, what do you think?
We will not see Luke soon. I think Mark Hamill's just taking care of himself, and it's good to see. I think he is all set. I think he did his stuff for the Mando thing because he wanted to play the hero Luke again, and I thought that was really, really cool. But I think he is all done. I'd be shocked if we got a cameo in the next movie. I think he's put his time in. You know, he's hung up his robe and lightsaber, so to speak. So I don't think so.
James?
I'm I'm with John totally. I mean, I think he would be willing to come back if something happened, but I wouldn't at this point expect that he's getting into shape to more convincingly bring Luke Skywalker back to the screen or anything like that. I just think you're probably right that he's taking care of himself. I do think he looks good, but I don't think it has any real connection to Star Wars.
And thank you, Matt. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Mark's just got signed on for some recent movie with Tom Hiddleston, I believe. He just signed up for some movie. So I think he's doing a bunch of other projects, which is really exciting for him, and I'm happy for him. You know me, I'd love to see him back as Luke Skywalker. I'll take him at any time as Luke Skywalker. I just think from comments that he's made, as well as comments that I believe Kathleen Kennedy made at Celebration of, no, the Luke story is kind of done with Rey. Like, she's on her own journey now, that they're not leaning into Mark Hamill, which is sad, but I hope we see him back at some point doing something, whether it be more behind the scenes or, I don't know, just at celebrations. It would be nice to see him there. But yeah, thanks for your question. Next up is Kenneth. Thank you for the super chat. He said, hey, love you guys. Thank you so much. He said, what do you think, when do you think Dr. Aphra will show up in live action? I'm going to start with you, James.
I don't know, man. It's tough. I think that they're already sort of playing in the world of the like New Rebellion, not New Rebellion. What am I saying? New Republic with Mandalorian and all that. But like, I really don't know that she shows up. I mean, it seems logically like around the same time. I'm not totally caught up with, like, I don't know if she's dead at this point. I don't think she is. I think the character's still alive and around. I'm going to say that the best place for her to show up right now, logically, seems like in that Mandalorian world. But I just don't know that they want to like stick that character in there. It feels like a character that they would sort of want to develop elsewhere. But I don't know where that would be. I mean, that's like in the original trilogy timeline. So it's tough. I mean, like her main thing, like she's done a lot of stuff, but I think like the main thing that people think about and associate with her is working directly with Darth Vader. So it's like,
exactly.
I don't know how you do that, but you know, okay. Kenneth, I want to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Kenny. Appreciate it, man. You're always also, commenting on all the episodes and stuff. So that's really nice. Appreciate it. I don't know that she is going to appear in live action. I mean, I don't think she's a big enough name of a character, especially what we just talked about with Disney Plus, to like get her own series. Now, even an animated series, I don't think she would be able to carry that from a value of production standpoint. And then, it'd be tough. It would almost feel like they were just bringing her to live action just to bring her to live action. And that's not the disparaging comment to the character. I don't think a character needs to come to live action to gain full value. I don't believe that. So I could see Aphra popping in other maybe future animated series, maybe further comic runs. They say she's the Indiana Jones of Star Wars, and I think that is cool. I just don't know where she would plug in. So when you say, when do I think she will show up? I don't know that she will. I don't know.
Yeah,
Kenny, what do you think? Let me know, Kenny. What do you think?
I just remember when Acolyte got announced and they kind of made this like, oh, this is going to be this adventure, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was like, oh, it's Aphra. Remember? Like that was like the first thing everybody said.
Oh, yeah.
Acolyte before it was Acolyte. It was just Leslie Headland's project.
Yeah.
I think she compared it to Indy. Didn't she say she like drew the map that was like
she said she used an atlas. Yeah, and you were traveling around. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people kind of doing the Indiana Jones arrow thing.
I don't think she's showing up. I think she's definitely a comic character that people love, and I get it. Like James said, like if she showed up there's so many cameos in The Mandalorian at this point. It's like, how many more people can we welcome in there's so many that we didn't even get to see in this past season, like Cobb Vanth, that we wanted more of. So I just think that, as always, Star Wars needs to be cautious when they're making these cameos and introductions of characters at different time periods and different projects. And I just think right now she's not gonna appear, but hopefully for you, Kenneth, hopefully for you. Next, we have a super chat from Freezy2324. Thank you so much. He said, did you see the recent video of Mark Hamill being hounded by autograph seekers? Do you think this behavior is what pushes him away from cons? I think that video was absolutely atrocious. Those people are not fans. Those are autograph sellers, resellers. Those are scalpers. Those are people that immediately after that video posted photos of them outside his car with the item, selling it on eBay. So I don't want to say, I saw people being like, oh, look at these fans. Those aren't fans. I want to make that clear. Second, I don't know if that's what's keeping him away from cons, to be honest. I think it could be a variety of things. You know, it could be that the cons don't have room for him. It could be a booking thing, timing thing. He could be working on other projects, like I said. I can't see him being someone that's sick of fan interactions. Being as someone that's met him a couple times, he's super nice and giving with his time. And I can't see him being like, no, I don't want to do that. I just see it's probably a couple different variables that is keeping him away, but I hope he comes back sometime soon because I will be the first person to buy a picture with him. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I watched the video and there's like, they're all shoving their things in the window and somebody like ends up like hitting him or poking him. Yeah. And something. And there's some voice, you know, someone goes, who did that? Oh, come on, guys. Like, and I'm like, who did that? You did that. We all did that. You all did that. Like, it's like there. I understand the scenario of like, we're all trying to get this one thing, but like who would go over the line? It's like, you're all over the line. Everybody in this group
shoving stuff through the window. Yeah.
When you get Tom Hanks to yell at you, you know, you're
Which
a problem.
they have. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll see Mark Hamill at Celebration 2027 for a 50th anniversary of Star Wars. That's the next time you'll see him.
And it's Japan. Who turns down a trip to Japan?
No, 2027.
27.
Oh, 27. Sorry, I thought you said 25.
Yeah, the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. I think will be a big one, and he'll be there for that, and hopefully George Lucas. But I don't think this has anything to do with fans. I agree. I think fans should stop buying autographs online. I think if we stop that, that gives them less power, and it makes them look for other ways to make cheap money. I'm not saying don't buy autographs at celebrations where you get to stand next to somebody and you bought your autograph and you had your moment. Completely different. I think that's great.
Secondary market.
I'm talking going on eBay and buying something, a piece of paper somebody signed. I think if we as fans, I don't know how we have a meeting about it, but if we stop buying stuff from these guys online, then they'll lose leverage and they'll lose the desire to want to do it. And that's the only way to stop it. But I don't think Mark Hamill sees that as fans. I think he knows better and understands who these people are. So yeah.
Awesome.
100%. Yep.
So we'll do one more question. So this is from Mike Mori. Thank you, Mike. I see you in the chat. What's going on? He said, how will the writer's strike affect Star Wars? # ask the resistance. John?
Well, we just talked about Andor, so there is an aspect of that. I think they'll, like they did with the pandemic with Mandalorian, and I think they'll find ways to still make it work with any shows that have release dates. I still think, like James said before, Andor will hit its release date. I think they may have to get a little clever with how they do some post-production stuff because they may have to push filming later than they anticipated. But they have a lot of time with Andor. You know, they have a year to do post-production, which is great. In terms of the other stuff, I'm not sure. It really comes down to how long this strike lasts. And I've been following it closely. Yep. Like Michael Jamin has been vlogging about it. And it just sounds right now that it's ugly because it sounds like there was just no counteroffer made by the studios. So they're starting at like 0.0 right now. But eventually they're going to have to do something because as more and more people who have big stature like Star Wars and Tony Gilroy say, oh, no, we're going to stand with them. We're going to shut this down. Money talks, and the studios are going to have to say, yeah, we'll pay you what you deserve. And, you know, because a lot of these writers have very humble financial lives. So these aren't, you know, they're not living in Malibu. These are people who need this money to survive. And a lot of them need to live out there to be still a part of the mix, and it's very expensive to live out there. So I understand all that. So it comes down to how long this lasts. If it lasts for a long time, it's going to impact Star Wars, no question about it, because there's going to be pressure for Disney and Star Wars, and they always listen to this stuff, to not cross the lines and to not continue producing stuff. So if it goes on for a long time, it will certainly impact Star Wars.
Yep, Mike, that's my answer. It depends on how long it goes. That John just nailed it as far as like the timeline there. Right now, if it ends tomorrow or a week from now, it won't affect Star Wars. If it keeps going for the next year, it's like, yeah, that's probably going to start affecting Star Wars. So at that point, it's how it affects Star Wars is going to be dependent on how studios develop to not have adapt to not having writers, you know. And I don't know what that means as far as like they move into this new era, you know. I mean, they're kind of fighting against AI and stuff. I'm not saying AI is going to write stuff, but I'm saying like whatever they do to adapt to a situation because they need to make money, that's how it's going to affect Star Wars. We don't really know what that is until it happens. So that's where we're at right now.
I'm going to give my answer, which is I think it should affect Star Wars. I don't think they should be making any Star Wars shows right now. I think they should support these people that are telling these stories, that are giving them the narratives to connect with audiences and to create these lasting tales. They shouldn't be making these stories. And if, you know, the presidents and CEOs of these big studios are making $240 million a year, then they should be able to pay these writers. They should be able to pay these people what they deserve. And not just writers, visual effects people, all these different elements of the stories that we love. People should be paid what they're due, what they're owed. And the fact that this whole Tony Gilroy thing to begin with started because he said he was still producing things. And someone called him out and was like, you're supposed to stay on the picket line. Like, you can't cross it. You're supposed to be a writer. You're supposed to be a part of this group. And you're not doing that. And then he released a statement saying, oh, I'm not doing these things. And then Disney at the same time is releasing letters saying like, oh, if you are not a writer, you better follow through with what you're supposed to be doing. Or you're going to get, like, we don't care if you get fined, like all this other stuff. They didn't offer these writers anything. They literally said, tough luck. And you're talking about an age where millions and millions and millions of people are seeing these shows and no one's seeing a dime for the work that they've done. So my response to this question is Star Wars should be affected. Star Wars shouldn't be coming out when it's supposed to come out if the strike is still going, because the people aren't getting what they're due. And I don't think I could enjoy these stories like the Duffer Brothers came forward and said, look, we're not making Stranger Things until they finish this. That's a bold statement, and that's what everybody should be doing, including Lucasfilm, including Star Wars. And that's how I see. That's what I think. That's it. That is my rant.
All right. Well, that will take us to the end of the show. We want to thank everybody for joining us. If you joined us live, or if you're listening on audio apps, you know, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you get your audio version of the podcast, we appreciate that. We're seeing a lot of growth on Spotify, so thank you to everybody who has found us over there. If you haven't yet, rate us on Apple 5 stars. We'd appreciate that. It helps us be found in searches, and same as Spotify. So thank you for that. And of course, thank you to everybody for getting us to the 2,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. We know that's small potatoes for some channels here, but for us, we just started a few months ago with this new channel, and we're really proud of it, and we're going to aim to grow that. So thank you to everybody for also subscribing to us over here on our channel. We appreciate that very much. And we couldn't do this stuff. You know, we all have kids, we have families, we have day jobs without the support of our patrons. It means a great deal to us. So if you haven't and you're able to, head over to patreon.com/resistancebroadcast and check out our tiers. We have a lot of great content over there, Discord servers, special events, a lot of cool stuff. And it's also just a way to support the pod at all levels. So go check that out. And a special thank you to our generals and spice runners. Our generals, CARMELO, John RISI, JETTA Rosewater, Frank Grande, Darth Hurricane, Nick KRATZ, Christian Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, DANI, Mike Rumore, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Count Pepto, Sneaky Zebra, Aaron Ellington, MICAH Harrison, Colin Cormier, ASLAM, and Jolton Jedi DiMaggio. And our spice runners, David PROBUS, Neil Shaw, Kendall GELNER, Dave Hornack, Thomas Hennessy, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, and Michael Fry. Thank you, and all of our patrons, for all of your support. We will be back on Monday with a guest. We're going to be joined by one of the authors of Star Wars Timelines, our buddy Clayton Sandell, making his 47th appearance on the Resistance broadcast. We're very excited to have him back. We're going to talk about what it's like making a Star Wars book, get into it, talk about it, nerd out, have fun. But we hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. For me, Johnny Hoey on Twitter, and Just Like the Movies, my movie podcast. Lacey, how about you?
People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Lacey Gilleran and on TikTok at It's Lacey Gilleran.
JB.
Twitter and Instagram at Myra Trunks.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you Monday morning with another episode right here on TRB. We'll see you around, kids.